Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock or related genres, one that I think you guys will really enjoy if you have similar tastes in music as me. I love recommending new albums, especially by lesser known artists that you may not have heard of before that aren't getting the big buzz of some of the bigger names in the progressive rock scene. And I have one of those today that I'm supremely excited to talk about. It's an album that's growing on me, that's fast rising in my rankings of favorite albums of the year. Could make a run for the top spot, I'm not sure yet, but I've just been really loving this record. This is Isbjörg and their album Falter. This is a band based in Denmark. They consider themselves stadium math rockers, I suppose, a six-piece. This is their sophomore album. Their previous album was called Iridescent and came out about 5 years ago. They've also jokingly called themselves Coldplay in 7/8. So they have a poppier aesthetic. So if you're not a fan of more poppier sounds, this may not be for you. But I think they do a fantastic blend of infusing these poppier sounds with a more proggy aspect as well. You know, these aren't just simple pop songs, but they do have anthemic, catchy choruses and hooks that are excellent features of the song that grab your ears immediately and make these things memorable and bring you back time and again. But as you uncover the layers and dig deeper, you find that they've added a lot of interesting, cool progressive rock tricks in their tool bag. And what this makes me think of is this more modern indie rock prog scene, if you will. You know, I feel like there's a movement of more modern bands who have these proggy undertones. I don't know if these bands would necessarily consider themselves full-blown prog bands, but they have that inspiration and they do things a bit more quirky and complex and different than your just standard rock music. Of course, the Deer Hunter to me are one of the biggest names in this kind of style, where a lot of prog fans have taken them as one of their favorite bands because they have this sort of aesthetic and aren't afraid to play with different genres and styles and do things in a bit more complex, quirky manner. Reign of Kindo is one I absolutely love that has more of a jazzy side to them, but there's a lot of pop hooks and choruses that catch your ear, and you could probably play them just fine as someone who just likes normal pop music without realizing all the complexity and jazzy layers and different time signatures and things they're playing with. Thank You Scientist comes to mind, although a bit more on the wackier spectrum, probably doesn't play well for just a mainstream pop crowd, but they have a bit of this aesthetic as well, bringing in some new flavors into a more catchier soundscape as well. Coheed and Cambria are one of the early touchstones to this sort of style, I think, as well, where you could argue that they're more mainstream alternative rock or something like that. But they have these complex sections as well. They add in little proggy bits that transcend and cross over them to a more prog-oriented crowd. This year, I was pleased to hear a new release from a band called Amscray, who has a bit of this style and aesthetic as well. Just this indie prog scene that's bringing this prog music into a new sort of generation that takes elements from a more modern sound, but also peppers in this kind of old school prog mentality. And I'm fascinated by it. It's one of my favorite styles that's going right now. And probably why this album hits so hard for me, because I feel like it fits in this landscape. It's melodic prog with lots of piano melodies, with a bit of math guitar goodness in the soundscapes, but there's a lot of big anthemic pop-oriented vocal hooks and choruses, and it's just a really fascinating listen, and every track has something to bring you back, to make you want to continue listening to it. That's addictive, perhaps, if you're into the style of music. I could see some people being turned away who aren't into the more poppier sounds and styles. Like I said, they've even compared themselves to Coldplay. They have a bit of that aesthetic in doses, but I feel like they add enough of their own unique stamp. They add enough of these complex sections and different kinds of sounds to make it unique and wholly their own, which to me makes them transcend just your typical band like you'd hear on mainstream pop or rock radio. Ornament starts the album off with some great guitar lines and rock power, tinkling keys throughout. I love their focus on the piano. A lot of bands nowadays, a lot of rock bands, of course, kind of focus on guitar-oriented sounds, but they definitely use the piano as a lead instrument, and it's often what starts their songs is this really interesting, intricate piano melody, which I love. But like I said, this track has a poppy sensibility, but just complex enough to make my prog heart happy and to enjoy it immensely. It has a surprising section in it with darker, heavier guitars towards the end, giving it a bit of a meatier crunch and allowing for a different kind of style to enter into the fray. But it's a wonderful opening track, really fun to get you into this music. Homeward Bound has some bright guitar stabs and persistent drumming before we open up into this poppier aesthetic. There's some great math rock quirk in certain sections, but never sacrificing their brilliant, memorable hooks. I love the piano breakdown section in the middle, another nod to some of their proggier roots. And it continues in this vein. Am I the Sinner Now has some beautiful piano playing and a persistent beat underneath. A little bit of a modern alternative sheen with distorted guitars added to this beautiful piano layer. Under Your River has some bright piano playing and fragile vocals, bit of a dreamier quality to this piece, some ethereal vocals over a heavenly piano sound. And I love how in the middle they just let the piano speak without anything else around it. It's just a beautiful spotlight and solo, and that silence that they include is just breathtaking and allows for this impactful moment when the band enters into the song. So just a fantastic track. And I love Annure. I feel like starting with Annure and continuing through, the album reaches almost another level as well. Annure introduces some female vocals into their sound, which is wonderfully blended with their male vocalists. Wonderful dreamy instrumental section with dreamy piano and some repeated guitar lines. Just a perfect balance of their anthemic poppy sound with some cool proggy musical interludes. And I love those dual female-male vocals. And it brings to mind almost a bit of Mir as well, who can kind of fit in this camp of having a poppier sound. You know, they consider themselves kind of a pop prog band, and I think that label could fit here as well. And with those dual male-female vocals, it definitely brings some of that Mir energy to mind, which, of course, makes me love it even more. I'm a huge fan of Mir, who are also making a run towards the top pick album of the year for me. If you haven't heard their record this year, it's fantastic. Solitaire is another great track with a great stabbing darker riff, and then their typical classical infused piano comes in with some great quirky beats. Some saxophone comes to the forefront, which adds a new musical texture that is really fun and fascinating to add to their sound. This is a fabulous track that showcases some musical complexity without sacrificing their penchant for great pop hooks. I really love Perfect Sky, which starts off with a bit of a funkier style math rock beat. I really love it, and you get some infusion of energy, a great funk edge to the guitar playing, but still has that big anthemic sound that's permeated throughout the record. And there's a great instrumental breakdown with classically inspired piano and funky guitar grooves. That's one of my favorite moments of the record. Dressed in White Lies is maybe one of the most proggy moments of the record. It almost brings to mind like a Haken energy, perhaps. It has a bit of a prog metal edge to its sound, more so than any other track. I love this kind of cool, twisty instrumental breakdown. Sounds like it could be just part of one of those cool instrumental interplays that Haken does so well in their instrumental sections. Piano and guitar interplay that just swirls and continues to morph and weave its way along. I just absolutely love this track as well. And it ends with The River of You. A beautiful soundscape, some great heavy crunch as well, a ripping guitar solo partway throughout, and a beautiful driving sound that builds as it goes and leads to this anthemic explosion of sound. I just absolutely love this record, and it's grown on me as I continue to listen to it. There's so many highlights, so many great parts to it. Never sacrifices those catchy melodies which dig into your ear and become so memorable and make you want to hit the repeat button. I could see it being a turnoff for people who are not into overtly poppy music, but if you don't mind hearing a bit of poppier sounds in your prog, I think this is a perfect blend of prog pop that absolutely floored me and continues to unveil itself to me. And I love music that does that, that's immediately catchy and accessible, that draws you in right off the bat, but also has enough complexity and cool intricacies to explore deeper as you continue listening to it. It doesn't get tired. You continue to unravel new mysteries and continue to enjoy listening to it as you press the repeat button over and over, and that's what's happened to me and why it keeps rising up. I don't know which review will come out first, but I also am talking about the Von Hertzen brothers this week, and similarly, this has a pop edge to it. Initially, I was maybe a little bit turned off by that, or at least thrown a bit, but as I've continued to listen, it just builds and builds. And like Von Hertzen Brothers' previous album, Red Alert and the Blue Forest, I could see this one rising up the ranks of my favorite albums list and becoming a real contender at the end of the year. So, fantastic record. Definitely a strong recommendation for people who like the kind of music I do, who like a little bit of pop in their prog, and I think it's a fun time and a great statement by a young, fresh band. And that's always what I like to hear, is younger bands coming to the forefront and showcasing that they have a lot of proggy sensibilities and can carry the genre forward and continue to impress and improve upon themselves. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you appreciated this review. I hope you enjoyed it. And please check out this album if you haven't before. It's definitely worth your time. And it's really been an absolute pleasure to let this album worm its way into my heart and just become one of my new favorites here. So I want that for all of you as well. So thank you guys so much for joining me. And hopefully you'll catch me in a future episode. And until then, goodbye everybody and enjoy the music. Bye.